Okay. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, dear Sustainability Working Group members. Let me welcome you here on our second meeting, our second session of the working group. This time, unfortunately, online, but we wanted to keep the momentum going, so we decided to organize even another online session. My name is Petr Karel, and I'm a vice chairman of the British Chamber of Commerce in Prague. I also have the pleasure to coordinate the activities of this working group. Today, we have got distinguished speakers that will be covering 3 or 4 main topics. One will be the COP26 agenda and way forward. Then we'll have Fit for 55, which is the European framework for decarbonization of the economy. And then we'll have 2 or 3 case studies that relate to circular economy. And that will be case studies from retail sector, from Tesco, Marks and Spencer, and Refolk, talking about the food waste and sustainable packaging. Before we start the agenda, I would like to ask Ambassador Nick Archer, the British ambassador in the Czech Republic, to open the session and say hello to everyone. And go ahead, Nick, over to you.
Peter, thank you very much indeed. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to confine myself to a very few remarks because my colleague Susanna, who some of you will be able to see on the screen already, will go into rather more detail on this subject from an embassy and British government perspective. But I think there are 4 or 5 things that are worth saying very, very briefly. I mean, the first, of course, is that it is good that this group exists and very good that it's supported by the British Chamber of Commerce. And I'm grateful to Peter and his colleagues and the Chamber for making this happen. I was asked to say 1 or 2 things about COP26. And I think the critical things are these, and there are only 2 of them. I mean, leaving aside whether you consider it a success, which you do if you're aware of how difficult it was for our team to get anywhere on the agenda, or you consider it a failure, which you justifiably do if you look at the scale of the challenge, which the world is still failing, that the world is failing still fully to live up to. The point was, it was part of a continuing process. And what's not necessarily always understood is that for the British, it was the beginning of our year in charge. So we actually spent 2 years preparing for COP26, because we know from past experience that actually a lot of the success of a COP does indeed come in the preparation. You cannot have world leaders turning up at the event without being aware of what they're there to talk about, being aware of the sort of parameters of public opinion in their home countries, being aware of a lot of quite technical practicalities. So we worked hard on it way in advance. And as those of you who email will know, it was part of our branding for well over a year in advance. But formally speaking, we've just taken over. So our job now is to build on what we did achieve at COP26, which was considerable and which does keep the possibility of an increase of not more than 1.5 degrees alive, so that when we hand over to Egypt at Sharm el-Sheikh next autumn, we can look back and say, not only did we get a lot agreed in principle, but we also got a lot underway. Because as I think we would all understand as business people, and in my case, a civil servant, every day of delay is disproportionately damaging in terms of how big the future task is. That's to say, if we do everything we said we'd do in Glasgow a few weeks ago, but we give ourselves until next summer to start off that activity, then already the cost and the pain become disproportionate. So we will be absolutely committed to this agenda all the way through till we hand over formally to the Egyptians in the autumn of next year. That's the first point. The second one, which I think is even more important, is that we may in retrospect decide that the greatest success of COP26 was that the terms of the debate shifted fundamentally. We are no longer talking about whether we're going to do the low carbon transition. We're merely talking about the how and the when, and that is a huge step forward. People saying this isn't necessary or it's just too expensive to bother with, these voices have been silenced. Those who are perceived now to be the skeptics or the opponents of a serious effort on climate change are those who say, well, we need to do it more slowly or we need to do it more cheaply. And this really brings me to my Czech point. And I have to watch myself a bit on this because I can get quite hot-tempered. I think we all know, because we wouldn't be in the sustainability working group if we didn't, that there are all kinds of excuses for inaction. You know, we have a heavily coal-reliant economy. We have district heating. We make lots of cars with internal combustion engines, and so on and so on and so forth. I mean, first of all, these things are not controversial facts. We all know it. But second, by restating and restating those facts, not only do we not get anywhere in terms of climate change, but we are disadvantaging the Czech economy. Because it's quite clear that those economies which have gone boldly forward, in some cases have accepted some short-term costs, some short-term disruptions to their economies, are those who are going to be the big beneficiaries of this massively growing industrial sector in future, and whose people will be happier and richer in future. So clearly this working group is about businesses comparing, talking to each other, sharing best practice about what they can do as companies. But equally clearly, with the arrival of a new government in this country, we need to be making a huge effort to persuade the government that to take this agenda seriously, to become a first mover, a front runner, is all economic upside, as well as being upside in a societal and in an environmental way. I think that that's a task that we can manage, but it does require business, whatever that means, to be vocal. Because I hear so often from Czech politicians and Czech friends that, you know, we could do this were it not for business. And actually, when I look and see what those businesses are, they're clearly not us. And actually, I don't believe there are that many of them. But there are some Czech companies on the whole who don't export much, who are a huge drag on this effort. And I think we need to tackle them, actually. Now, these are perhaps things an ambassador shouldn't say about another country, but the point is that even though that responsibility is Czech, the impact of a failure to take responsibility is global for all the reasons we well understand. So great that we're doing this. I hope we can both do what we're meant to be doing within this group, but I hope we can also become part of a very vocal activist lobby for the right kind of government support, the right kind of government interventions that will enable this very sophisticated, smart economy to do the transition quickly, to do it successfully, and to turn the Czech Republic into part of the solution. There you are, that's more than enough, Petter, but that's what I wanted to say. Thank you for listening.
Well, thank you very much, Nick, and a great point regarding the new government, and we definitely want to become a discussion partner and one of the platforms that will be talking to new government about the sustainability. So thank you very much again. What I want to do now is to do a small recap of the last session for the benefit of the participants, also those who couldn't attend last time around. So last time we met in person about 70 people from business, academia, from the government, from the embassy. And the main topics were what do we do as a group and how we do go forward. And we also had companies presenting their trajectory to carbon zero balance. So we had CEO of Vodafone who presented their views on how to connect 1 billion people, how to halve the consumption and impact on environment, and how to make 1 billion lives of people better, and how does impact the company culture. So it was quite interesting to hear that it's not just about individual actions, but it's more about transformation of the company's philosophy. The second point, I'm just looking at my notes, was from Ernst & Young that actually had a very interesting point, how we turn ignorance and pretenders into truly sustainable companies who believe in sustainability. So again, a similar point that the minds and the ethos of the companies has to transform to become true supporters of green growth and sustainability. And Ernst & Young also presented their commitment to net zero in 2025, if I didn't get it wrong, which is quite ambitious. The last section was devoted to academic, so sociological view of how we support, how we transform. And we had Professor Laventin from the Czech Academy of Science, and she was talking about the leverage points framework, which is an interesting point when you have a shallow and deep leverage points. And in business, we would probably call this low-hanging fruits against imagination breakthroughs. So that it is important to do a daily business, such as introduce the garbage bins for various bits and pieces for recyclables, but also look at bigger transformation points, such as how do we change the technologies? How do we go from fossil to hydrogen or fusion or what have you? So this was the notion. And at the end, we had a voting process whereby we have chosen 3 main topics that we would look at. And the 3 being green finance and ESG reporting. So it's sort of one package. It will be very topical, I believe, namely for the banking sector, insurance sector, and international companies. The second point was the energy transition. So basically from fossil to renewables, and how do we make that work, including mobility, car batteries, etc. And the third point was on circular economy. And we'll be tackling this one today with participation of Tesco, Marks & Spencer, and Refolk. And before we go into the agenda, I'd just like to announce that today we've got about 60 participants from different industries, ranging from banking, advisory, auto industry, retailers, other industrial energy companies. So good number. We'll have these 3 presentations. At the end, we'll have a Q&A session if the time allows. So let's go into the agenda now. And I'd like to ask Zuzana Stechlíková, who is the senior advisor at the embassy, to talk us through the COP26 and beyond, basically. Zuzana, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for giving me floor and for the invitation. I will start sharing my screen with you. Hopefully the technology will not let us down. Could I just ask you to confirm that you see the presentation? All right, perfect. So I would like to thank Nick at the beginning, because he basically set up the scene very well for what I'm going to talk about. I will try to get a little bit more into the detail, but not too much to make it relevant and not to bore you within the next 15 minutes. First, before I get to the actual outcomes of Glasgow, let me outline a few challenges that the British negotiators were facing coming up to the summit. It also helps us understand what an outcome it is that we actually achieved. It was the biggest summit that ever was hosted in the UK, and it was hosted in the middle of COVID-19 pandemic. So for a long time, as you may know, it was postponed already once. It was supposed to happen last November. That was not really the case, unfortunately. But what happened is that we managed to organize this huge gathering of people from all over the globe under the very difficult, strict circumstances. What we were seeing on the scene of discussion was quite a gap in ambition. What Nick was mentioning in his introductory remarks is that the scene has changed and there's a lot of new information right now. The public opinion has shifted. There are still states which are taking it more seriously than others. There are still states which are in better conditions and better suited to be ambitious than the others. So going up for this negotiating journey, we absolutely didn't have a level playing field. It was also one of the heaviest workloads that Glasgow needed to deal with because there was a lot of leftovers from previous COPs that needed to be resolved. A lot of very technical issues that basically put together the framework within which we all operate that would ensure us that when we are talking about emission cuts, when we are talking about targets, we are actually living in the same universe made of the same rules and conditions. So those were all the challenges coming up to Glasgow. The UK did set 4 goals for the negotiations. First of all, it was mitigation, which is something that you've heard of quite a lot, even if the word is still a little bit of a mystery to some people. It's really the keeping 1.5 alive. It means that we are trying to limit our emissions, means that we're trying to do whatever we can to phase out fossil fuels, to put more emphasis on renewables, on alternative sources of energy, on electric vehicles, and so on and so on. There's plenty of measures that are falling under mitigation. Another part of goals were connected to adaptation, where we need to acknowledge that there is already climate change happening, and there's a lot of finance missing to tackle the actual problems that are stemming out of that these days. Speaking of budget, mobilizing finances, going to Glasgow, we already had the pledge that was supposed to happen until 2020 of developed member states contributing $100 billion every year for climate finance. We had over around $80 billion, so it's a bit of a gap there. So that was the situation. And then on collaboration, the goal was to move forward with the rulebook, Paris rulebook, and also to launch a couple of initiatives that will take the collaboration of member states further in different topics, such as modern technologies, such as renewables, such as phasing out coal. So now the outcomes. Basically, the biggest and most important thing is that at the end of the conference, there was a deal which basically includes all those things that I've been talking about, that I will talk a little bit more in depth later on. We had to wait a little bit for it because the negotiations took a day and a half longer than was initially expected. But at the end, we did have the Glasgow Climate Pact. 197 parties came together to support this pact. It includes also parties like the European Union, so it's not specifically just national states, but basically all the countries agreed with the outcomes, which is a great success. What we've also seen is that the targets which were agreed will be re-evaluated next year, which is something that we haven't seen previously. It is very important because it doesn't give the member states and member states on global level, the national states, a time to rest. There will be a constant emphasis on trying to be as ambitious as we can be. For the first time ever, COP actually agreed on language that stresses phasing down fossil fuels. You must have heard about this, that the last minute shift, which was initiated by India and China, the fact that the phrasing now goes phasing down and not phasing out. Nevertheless, this is something that when we speak with people who were on ground in Glasgow, especially the UK negotiators, we had last week just here the special envoy of British government, Mr. John Merton. He was saying that a year ago, everybody would be just super happy to have a coal anyhow mentioned as phasing it down and phasing it out doesn't necessarily matter. It is there. This is the first time that we have the overall agreement that coal is bad and we need to get rid of that. What we saw were stronger commitments, and what is important is that now, after COP, 90% of the world economy is now covered by net zero targets, which is something that is going to be crucial for the overall objective of keeping the 1.5 degrees until the end of the century under control. When we were going to Glasgow, it was more than 2 degrees. It was actually, well, this kind of differs on different calculations, but some sources say that it was 2.7, some will say it's 2.5. It was definitely much more. Current calculations are that with the pledges that we have at the end of COP26, this is now around 1.8. So it's not ideal. The job is absolutely not done, but we are on a good path. So when you will hear that the 1.5 was kept alive, it means that there is still a lot of work to be done, but we're on a good road. As I mentioned, there will be yearly assessment of emission reduction targets, which is very important. We've also seen the new pledges to net zero, most importantly from India, which set it for 2070, which seems to be very far away. But on the other hand, again, there are always two ways to look at it. We can criticize India for not being ambitious enough. On the other hand, India is enormously quickly growing country where, you know, even the fact that there is a net zero target is a huge success, and it was not really super expected. Same goes for the performance of other member states that I mentioned. Under the scope of mitigation, I can also mention some other initiatives. Most important one that also made it to media is the deforestation declaration, where now 130 countries pledged, including Czech Republic, actually pledged that they will stop deforestation basically by 2030. And now 90% of world forests are covered by those pledges, which is very important because it also covers the most important forest regions, such as Brazil or Asia. So those are the most important successes on mitigation. When we look at adaptation, well, I had quite a lot of written here, but I will try to make it short to make sure that we get to all the points. So I will just summarize that what we've seen was a great mobilization of funds, which are now available for member states already dealing with consequences of climate change. We do have new mechanisms to help countries with loss and damage. There will be follow-up, basically, negotiations on this topic, because it's very difficult to put a price tag on damages, always has been in terms of climate. This is even more complicated, but we have seen you know, significant increase in adaptation fund and in other resources available for those countries who need it the most. On finance altogether, as I mentioned already, there was this pledge to contribute $100 billion to climate finance per year. That was not the case. Countries in Glasgow have promised to deliver that by 2023. And also to start working on the post-2025 goals, because it is clear that those numbers will have to go up. Another very important thing in terms of finance is that 34 countries and 5 public institutions have pledged that they will stop international support for unabated fossil fuels next year, which is something that kind of makes sense, because it's difficult to argue to your own public that you're not going to be using fossil fuels in your own country and then financially support those being used in another country. But at the same time, this is also a huge step ahead, because a lot of the current new capacities in terms of fossil fuels are actually internationally funded. So it's not really just a problem within the national states. On collaboration, just very quickly, we have seen the Paris rulebook finalized. The important part there is to say that since Paris Agreement was agreed in 2015, we have seen various other COPs trying to finalize on how should it be delivered. So this is basically just the guidelines on how we are supposed to make it work. And it was not possible. For technical reasons, it was very controversial. There were many points missing. So the fact that we finally do have Paris rulebook finalized is a great success. It was the reason why we've run a little bit longer than expected, but at this moment we can start actually fulfilling the criteria that are set up already for a couple of years. What we've seen there, the most important things, basically Article 6, you must have heard about it already a couple of times. It provides the foundation for an international carbon market, and what was kind of the problematic part there was that some countries were afraid that there would be a double counting of emission cuts, meaning that both the buyer and the seller could basically point out to those emissions and say that it is something that was saved. So there needed to be checks and balances to prevent that from happening. Another thing which is key on the technical negotiations that we have agreed is the common timeframes for emission reduction commitments, because one thing is that we will say that, you know, we will cut our emissions by this and this amount to this and this year, but it depends, you know, the time frame which you're taking into account while calculating those emissions is essential, because whether it was 5 years or 10 years, it can quite significantly impact the outcome. So in the current wording, the 5-year cycle is supposed to be the one that we will go by, and also there will be kind of a yearly assessment. So basically the prediction will be for 5 years, but every year there will be a check up whether this is something that is still serving a purpose. And the last part is enhanced transparency framework, which we all know that any negotiation is difficult once there's not a mutual trust. So the aim of the transparency framework is to make sure that everybody is following the same set of rules, everybody is reporting in the same way, based on the same requirements. So this is very important. Another thing, so those were the main goals that we've set up in the beginning that I mentioned. That we have seen significant outcomes based on that. Another thing that is important to mention is the action for climate empowerment. So for the first time, for example, this COP has agreed that young people should be part of the discussion also further on. And there should be a lot of more support for advancing climate education, trainings, raising public awareness, and so on. And last part that I want to mention is that from the UK's initiative, there has been quite a lot of sectoral cooperation launched. Those were different statements and declarations which were connected to theme days, which we've seen throughout COP. So there were new declarations where countries pledged to work on electromobility, for example, supporting new technologies, phasing out methane as another dangerous gas, and so on and so forth. So there's been quite a lot. On the Czech Republic, I'll just go through this very quickly. We have had a very difficult situation, as Nick mentioned in the very beginning, when there was no clear mandate for the government. But at the same time, the EU was negotiating as a bloc, so it didn't necessarily prevent the successful outcomes of the EU as such. What we've seen is that probably where there government with a clear mandate, signing up to more of those declarations would have been easier. Of course, the speech of outgoing Prime Minister Babiš has been quite a disappointment for many people who are following climate topics very closely, but that is the situation that we need to deal with. He was speaking to a domestic audience, and that's what happens with leaders from time to time. Tasks for the future. An important thing that Nick also mentioned in his introductory remarks is that it is not about pledges, declarations, and statements. It is about what we do with them afterwards. So the work did not end in Glasgow. The work has started in Glasgow, not only for the UK, which holds the COP presidency until next autumn, when it will hand over to Egypt, but also to all those who actually want to work on the progress in terms of climate. Because now the pledges need to be implemented on national level, but that also means including businesses, including international cooperation, including the state regulations. It means really that the work needs to start. And the UK presidency has a great ambition to assist the countries as much as possible to live up to the expectations which are coming up now with those big statements. So I would like to end here. Thank you very much for your attention, and I will be happy to answer any questions if there are any, if we have time afterwards. Thank you.
Zuzana, thank you very much. I think it was a very clear summary of something that was most complex summit ever. So it's not easy to give a concise and straightforward summary, but you managed. So thank you very much. And I think your presentation very nicely ties into Radek Novak, who will be talking about the EU framework and how to get net zero targets, the Fit for 55. Radko, can I ask you? Go ahead.
Yes. Could you please someone confirm me that you can see my presentation?
It's on. Yep.
Thank you very much. So it would be, I think, quite hard task also to make such a nice summary about Fit for 55 because it's also very, I would say, complicated agenda. But I will try to summarize it in 10 or 15 minutes. So let's try. So good afternoon again, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for inviting me to today's online discussion. And as already said, I would briefly guide you through the Green Deal and Fit for 55 package, which contains the specific measures how the EU wants to, and not only EU, but at this moment, the European Commission wants to combat climate change. So let's start. From the broader perspective, Green Deal and Fit for 55 package have their basics in the Paris Agreement, which was signed by almost all countries in the world. And for the European Union is the crucial thing or crucial document in the fight against the climate change, because following the Paris Agreement, individual states or also grouping of states have begun to set their carbon neutrality targets. And some countries, as you can see in this picture, plan to progress even faster than a generally accepted year of 2050, like for example Finland, Austria, Germany or Sweden. Others like China or India expect a little bit later date. But when we come to EU level, so following the Paris Agreement, European Commission came up with a European Green Deal in 2019, and Green Deal is a roadmap. What we want to achieve in the EU. And we want to ensure a sustainable economy and also net zero greenhouse gas emissions in the EU by 2050. It is an ultimate goal. And European Green Deal also contains a key goal 2030, when we want to reduce the greenhouse gas emission by 55% compared to 1990. That's why the package is called Fit for 55. And what is new, that this goal, 55%, is unlike the past, has been introduced to the EU law. So it's called EU Climate Act. And Green Deal covers all sectors, all policies and activities in the EU, as you can see at this slide. So in the Green Deal, you can find things that covers energy production, agriculture, and food processing, also industry or circular economy. You can find here a huge field of mobility or transport, or also buildings, and not only commercial buildings, but also the residential buildings, biodiversity, restoration, or pollution, elimination of pollution. So this is the Green Deal, and maybe two important things that from my perspective, Green Deal is a vision. It's a strategy what we want to achieve in the EU, and Fit for 55 package, what I'm going to talk about later, is a way how we want to achieve it. So Green Deal is what, and the Fit for 55 is how we want to achieve it. And the second important thing is that Green Deal is already approved by all EU member states. It's approved, but Fit for 55 package, they are only proposals of European Commissions, and which still have to be discussed by the European Parliament and European Council. So these proposals that I'm going to talk about maybe can change in the future, because there will be negotiation about it. So Green Deal, I said, but Fit for 55 package is built on two parts or two legs. So firstly, on the instruments that already exist in the EU and that have been in the operation for many years. So for example, emission trading system, which covers about 40% of greenhouse gas emission in the EU, or for other sectors, it is effort sharing regulation. We have national renewable targets already in the EU, or we have targets for energy savings, or we have also the emission standards for cars and vans. So the first part improves or is tightening up the regulation under the existing tools, or is increasing the targets in the existing instruments. So for example, what Fit for 55 proposes, or what European Commission proposes under the existing tools. So for example, the emission allowances should be withdrawn from the market faster than planned in the past, and also aviation and maritime transport should be included in this system. Also, the individual sectors will have their own renewables energy targets. So, for example, buildings in the EU and the renewables in energy consumption in buildings should reach almost 50% of consumption in 2030, or the goal of energy savings for each member state of the EU will be doubled in the period of 2024 to 2030, which I think will be quite difficult for the Czech Republic to meet, because we are already struggling the current targets to meet. So that would be, I think, challenge. But anyway, other proposals under existing tools, as you maybe already heard, is that in the 2035, the European Commission proposes that the cars with internal combustion engines will not be allowed to sell. So this is the proposals in a very brief structure under the existing tools. As I already said, it involves tightening up the regulations or increasing the existing targets. But what is maybe more important is that the European Commission also came with new tools or new instruments. And I would mention three most important from my point of view. And firstly, it is a new emission trading system for transport and buildings. European Commission thinks that in these sectors the progress it's not so fast as should be, and that's why the European Commission proposes this completely new emission trading system, and it would work in a such way that emission allowances would not buy the final customers of energies, but the suppliers of the fuels. So, for example, the operator of a petrol station or a gas supplier. So this is the first proposal. Of course, this will have some impact on the price of energy. That's why European Commission want to set up social climate fund that would fund the people with low income or people who would need some help. So this is the first proposal. Secondly, minimum tax rates will be set according the impact of the energy on the environment. So the highest minimum energy tax would be on fossil fuels, the lowest for renewables. And thirdly, maybe most interesting thing is that the European Commission is proposing so-called carbon border tax. It's called carbon border adjustment mechanism, and what is the aim? The aim is that the producers in the EU have to buy the emission allowance if they are producing some energy-intensive products. But the producers outside the EU, they do not pay the carbon price. So that's why European Commission proposes this carbon tax. And it would work in such way that importers to the EU from the abroad will have to buy so-called carbon certificates that will correspond to the price of carbon. So it means to the emission allowance if the product is made in the EU. So the producers in the EU will have to buy emission allowance. The producers outside the EU and the importers will have to buy carbon certificates. From the 2026, this system would cover five products: the production of iron and steel, cement, fertilizers, aluminium, and electricity. But other sectors will come later. So this is, in a very short summary, the Fit for 55 package. But what I would also mention is that this package and whole Green Deal is accompanied by very generous subsidies for the Czech Republic and also for the companies in the Czech Republic. And I'm convinced that they should and could use them for the energy transition. And this Green Deal is also accompanied by the system of sustainable finance. And this is my last very brief topic. Sustainable finance in the EU consists of three things. Firstly, financial institution must include in their risk assessment the sustainability criteria or sustainability factor. In this moment, they have to monitor it, but in the future, maybe they will, or not maybe, but probably they will have to reduce the carbon footprint of their founded assets. The secondly, today already big companies and in the future also mid-sized companies will have to report on their sustainability activities. It's called ESG reporting, and it's intended to the public. And thirdly, to make it clear what the green or sustainable project is, EU Commission or European Commission came with a so-called EU taxonomy. And EU taxonomy is an extensive list of typical project or technical criteria from different sectors of the economy that can be considered as a green or as a sustainable. And investors, it's not obligatory. Investors do not have to follow the EU taxonomy or this technical criteria. But if they want to mark their project as a green or sustainable, it must comply with the EU taxonomy. And my last slide shows one picture or one example, and it is the EU taxonomy and automotive and industry. And the taxonomy is a question: and answers the question, what economic activities, in our case in the automotive industry, is contributing substantially to climate change mitigation. And if you look at passenger cars production, so in the passenger cars production until the end of year 2025, your project would be considered as a green if you produce low and zero emission light duty vehicles. It means plug-in hybrids or battery cars or hydrogen cars from 1st January of 2026. Specific emission of the car of CO2 have to be zero, which means that your project or your production of cars would be considered as a green from 2026. If you produce the vehicles which have no CO2 emissions, that means purely battery electric vehicles or hydrogen cars. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the attention, and if you have any question, feel free to ask or contact me later. Thank you.
Radko, thank you very much. It was very interesting. A long journey ahead of us. And considering we probably have just a couple of years, 5 years or 10 years to do net zero carbon, it feels like not a transformation, but a revolution rather. So I think quite intensive work ahead of us. Now, 4 questions that you want to ask from the audience, you can either pose them to Pavel Farah or me, or we'll have a Q&A session at the end, and you can use your raise hand button to ask the question at the end. But now I would like to move to our 3rd session, which is on sustainable packaging and food waste, and the retailers addressing the issue of sustainability. And we're starting with Tesco, and we have Michal Vaňáček, who will be presenting us the Tesco case study. So Michal, if I may ask you.
Sure, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michal Vaňáček, and I work for Tesco Stores as a government affairs and community manager. Let me try to, can you please see my presentation, guys, just to confirm? It seems to be the case. So I'll try to briefly outline what Tesco is doing on our way to be climate neutral. Tesco as a retailer has been serving Czech customers for over 25 years so far via different sales channels. I don't think it's needed right now to introduce more in detail. Let's rather focus on our sustainability commitments. They are built on 4 basic pillars, all of them with public and measurable commitments. First one, it's a fight against the waste, where the Tesco actually has been committed to tackling food waste from the field to the fork since 2016, being the first retailer in the Czech Republic who on regular basis publish its own food waste data. The second pillar is sustainable packaging. We committed that by 2025, all Tesco own-brand products will be sold in fully recyclable packaging. Next pillar are our commitments within our healthy and sustainable diets strategy, including ongoing reformulations of our own-brand products, as well as increase of sales of plant-based alternatives by 300% by 2025, which is also connected to the, let's say, our initiatives tackling the planet. Last but not least, our climate changes initiatives. So to say, when earlier in this year, in August, Tesco announced commitment to achieve climate neutrality from operations by 2035, sorry, covering all types of greenhouse gases. This commitment was originally scheduled for 2050 and including only CO2 carbon emissions. So we have accelerated this one. We have therefore strengthened our commitment to tackle climate change. This target related to scope 1 and 2 emissions applicable for 2035 applies for the Tesco whole group, including UK, Ireland, and Central Europe operations, which means that the Czech Republic, Slovakia, and Hungary. We have also committed to cut emissions from our product and supply chain to zero by 2050. As you can see, the split, these emissions make up more than 90% of our total emissions footprint, and will basically cover everything, all the emissions generated across our value chain, including consumption of the products bought in Tesco and so on. So I would say very demanding commitment when it comes to the action that we need to take, and that's why we will be over the next 12 months setting out a clear plan for achieving those two targets, including detailed decarbonization roadmaps. What we are already doing, or what we have already achieved when it comes to the food waste, we consider it as significant source of the emissions. Since 2020, all stores in the Czech Republic, all Tesco stores have been basically on daily basis donating food surpluses to the people in need and to feed the animals, which is very important aspect of our food waste prevention. Secondly, Tesco has committed to meet United Nations Sustainable Development Goals 20.3, so to halve food waste by 2030. We have repeatedly achieved this goal last year, this year again. As you can see, it's in numbers. It means a reduction of 71% of our food waste within Czech operations since 2016. And last but not least, what I've already said, we are indeed going beyond the social and economic aspect of the framework of the issue of the food waste, as we know well that food losses and waste account about 8% of total greenhouse emissions. This number is supposed to even increase in upcoming years, in a very near future. That means that avoiding waste in our operations is the best way how to start reducing the impact of our retail and the whole food industry to the environment. We know that by donating our food surpluses, we saved 72,000 tons of emissions during last 5 years. Another pillar, what I already said, sustainable packaging. We have removed all hard to recycle materials from Tesco own brands last year, and we are on our way to have all our own brand products in fully recyclable packaging by 2025. We've started with 2 entire product categories: the household, which is about 20 to 200 products. The second category that we announced last week actually is category of noodle, pasta, rice, Tesco products, and the other categories will follow in the years to come to meet the target as we said. There are several, or actually many other, let's say, minor initiatives that help us to cut our impact on the planet, like FNF hangers reuse system, where basically customers who were buying our FNF clothes and do not need hangers, they just leave them in the stores, and we are giving them the second life, or sending them to recycling center when they're clean, sorted out, and then sent back to garment factories and reuse. Again, we've got from our supplier the precise number of the tons, volumes and so on, and also reduce the footprint of these hangers. Climate change. I've already briefly touched upon our commitments. Tesco in 2009 actually was the first company, or became the first business, that globally set its ambition to become carbon neutral by 2050. I've already said that we've accelerated and broadened this commitment. This also means that we've got a long record when it comes to the measurement and reporting of our emissions, both from scope 1 and 2. So we can say that since 2015, in our operations within Central Europe, those 3 countries I've already said, we've achieved emissions reduction by 67%, which basically reflects progress in different areas, including switching to 100% renewable electricity in our stores. By the way, electricity has been historically our biggest source of operational emissions. Other tangible examples I could say are improvement in energy efficiency, such as switching to LED lighting in our stores, or moving to different types of gases in our fridges. We also trying to minimize kilometers of our vehicle travel. Our distribution fleet also collects goods from our suppliers, so-called primary distribution. And in the Czech Republic, we've saved only during the last year 325,000 of kilometers of empty runs, which is obviously associated also with our carbon emissions. So this is in a nutshell what Tesco is trying to do and is doing in this regard. Many thanks once again for the invitation, and glad to be with you and ready to answer any questions you might have. Thank you once again.
Great stuff. Michal, thank you very much. It's very encouraging to see that one of the biggest retailers are taking this obligation seriously, and the commitment is serious, and you've already achieved quite the reductions. So it does make an impact on society. Our next speaker couldn't attend in person due to COVID restrictions and restraints. So for Marks and Spencer, we have recorded a presentation that's probably 7 or 8 minutes, again about the achievements and the way how Marks and Spencer is going sustainable. Pablo, if I can ask you to put it on screen. And the message is from the global CEO of Marks and Spencer, Steve Roll.
As a business that's been around for 137 years, we know how important it is to look to the future. M&S has been built on a belief that caring about our impact on tomorrow's world, as well as today's, is not just good citizenship, it's good business. And that's why in 2007 we launched our sustainability programme as Plan A. Fast forward 14 years, and this is now a climate emergency. Carbon dioxide concentration is the highest in at least 2 million years, and the world now sees twice as many days over 50 degrees centigrade each year as it did in the 1980s. We cannot shy away from the challenge of climate change. It affects us all, our colleagues, our customers, the people that make our products across our supply chain, and the many global communities we serve. Customers like Louisa. She and her family regularly shop at our stores in Derbyshire, and she wrote to me last year. We're meeting here today in North Wales at the site of our long-term supplier partner's Village Bakery. I have a copy of your letter here, and you finish this letter with this phrase: I do not understand why I have to take my time to try and save my future from being ruined by companies and people destroying the ecosystem. We need, you were 14 then, Plan A is 14 years old. We've done a lot, but there's just so much more we need to do.
Yeah.
How do you feel about it?
It's really frustrating for me and for my generation, because we can't do anything because, well, we don't have a business and we're too young, but it's our future that's being affected.
What gives you hope?
There are so many things that gives me hope. For example, young voices, as well as old, like David Attenborough. David Attenborough, because he actually shows the reality of things, and it's not necessarily his future. Louisa,
right, I mean, we've started to take action, and this is part of the launch of what I think is the next stage of Plan A. But as one of our great critics, how are we doing so far?
There are so many things that I've found out about what you're doing that is really great. There are some things that, like the timescale of them needs to shrink. I want to make sure that my future is secure as possible.
Thanks for the day. Very grateful for this letter and for your enthusiasm about something which we know we've got to do and get on with. Whilst the challenge may be daunting, we know that change is possible. Our heritage has shown us time and time again that when we come together as an M&S family, we can change things for the better. In 2008, we were the first retailer to banish the free carrier bag. It was 2012 when we became the first major retailer in the UK and Ireland to achieve carbon neutral status. But we know we need to do more, and that's why we're putting a sustainable future at the heart of our strategy. Our Head of Sustainability, Carmel McQuaid, is going to explain just what that means.
Our Plan A programme affects every area of M&S. Here's what that involves and what we're determined to achieve.
At M&S, we know there's no Plan B when it comes to our planet. That's why we're focusing Plan A on our mission to become a net zero business by 2040. Put simply, net zero means we don't add any more greenhouse gas emissions to the atmosphere than we take out of it. To do this, we need to know our carbon footprint, which at M&S is around 5.7 million tonnes each year. This is made up of the emissions from running our shops as well as our distribution and transport network. However, this is not just about our own operations. The biggest impact comes from what is called Scope 3 emissions. These include how suppliers source, make and move our products, and how our customers use them. So from mills to our tills, from farms to forks, we will have to transform the way we do things. Our first goal is to rapidly reduce our carbon impact, cutting our footprint by 1/3 by 2025 and more than half by 2030. To get there, we'll need to act quickly, cutting our emissions in property and transport, reducing single-use plastic, closing the loop on recycling, and minimising food waste. We also want to make sustainability easier and more rewarding for our customers. We will be investing in new products and services to help them enjoy a lower carbon lifestyle. As an own brand retailer, we're uniquely positioned to work with our trusted suppliers and partners. Together, we are committing to zero deforestation, sourcing more sustainable fibres, driving the circular economy, and supporting farmers as they move towards regenerative agriculture. We know we can't do this alone, so we're working with others to make this a reality and together achieve net zero by 2040. Because there is no Plan B.
As an own brand retailer, we're uniquely positioned to make more choices about our products. We can work with our trusted supplier partners to cut emissions, reduce waste and innovate to find new and better ways of doing things together. Suppliers like Village Bakery here in Wrexham. You make fantastic white supersoft rolls. If our customers look behind the label, what are they going to see?
Well, not only are they going to taste a great product, but if we look at the wider picture here, you know, we've purchased this 6.5 acres of woodland here, a nature reserve that we've given to the local community. We've renatured everything. We've planted wildflowers, cornflowers, poppies.
Wow.
We've made 3 wildlife ponds.
Tell me about what you're going to do with the rest of the grounds here.
We are building a solar park. That will help us to become more self-sufficient.
I mean, you're using every square inch of this facility, I think, to do something good.
So we've just invested in a new silo system. We can maximise the flour delivered into the bakery, and it's more effective and efficient. We're really chuffed what we've done on the outside. What you really want to see is what we've done on the inside. Let's come and have a look.
There's nothing better than the smell you get when you come into here. We've just seen some fantastic innovation in terms of sustainability.
We've got the very latest of ovens. The typical old-fashioned oven is up to 40+ burners. We've got 2 high-pressure burners on ours. Super efficient, they use very little gas and ultimately very little emissions. And all that heat, excess heat from the oven, we recover to power all our hot water.
So not only is it more efficient, it's being reused to create even more efficiency
elsewhere in the factory, yes. Right. And that's just a win-win.
Innovating with our supplier partners has been part of Marks & Spencer's DNA. Westbridge Furniture in Holywell were one of our first eco-factories way back in 2008, and I'm about to meet Anthony Pardia, who's their technical director, to see how those innovations are progressing today. Did the business benefit by becoming, an eco-factory and learning how to become more efficient and more sustainable?
The expertise and the advice we had from your store development team, the lighting engineers, the heating guys, it makes you more efficient. And if you're more efficient, you're more agile.
And it's not just the factory environment became sustainable.
We've introduced lots and lots of sustainable initiatives. We've got the sustainable timber. We are FSC certified as a factory. In addition to that, we've got recycled fabrics in the range. Foam, as you know, is a fossil fuel-based product. We want to reduce the amount of foam that's in the products. We've got sprung interiors, we've got polyester fibre, which is recycled and can be recycled. And it's not just about the materials themselves, it's about the testing and the standards that we've set with M&S. So we build products that last, and that's the best thing you can do for the environment.
Brilliant. So not only is it great looking sofa, it's also making a real difference to the planet.
It absolutely is.
We want to make taking climate action easier and more rewarding for our customers too. From our Fill Your Own Refill programme to our clothing recycling scheme, Swapping.
At M&S, we're really proud to be one of the first retailers to launch a clothing recycling scheme. Swapping is a way in which customers can bring items of pre-loved clothing into store, and we will give those items to Oxfam. Oxfam will then resell those items. If they can't be resold, they will be recycled. Since 2008, we've recycled over 35 million items of clothing. This means nothing goes to landfill. All customers need to do is bring their pre-loved items into store. You go to the swap box, you scan the QR code on the box, and a treat will appear in their Spots account. This offers an incredible opportunity for customers to be rewarded for doing something important for the environment.
Everyone has a part to play in building a sustainable future. Our 70,000 colleagues, the 1,000 different suppliers we work with worldwide, and the 30 million customers that shop with us. Because the action we take today protects our planet for tomorrow. Plan A drives us to make better choices, to ensure M&S and this beautiful planet and the resources we rely on are in better shape for the future. Because there is no plan B.
Okay, so that was a recording from Marks and Spencer, who unfortunately couldn't be with us today, but will be next time. And again, nicely ties into a next presentation, because one of the points I picked up was the strategy from farmers to forks. And actually our next presenter is Dan Beseda, who represents Refork, a biotech, high-tech company that is looking into biodegradable packaging and cutlery solutions, which I personally find very exciting. So Dane, the floor is yours.
Thank you for having me. Let me just position so you can see me a little bit. Unfortunately, I don't have such a great background like the folks from Mark and Spencer. We have to work on that. But if we talk about sustainability in packaging, I think we cannot avoid talking about plastic. Actually, when I started my previous company, which was a large chemical company, they told me as first sentence, plastic is fantastic, right? And it's true, you know, because it's a material that you can make almost anything out of it. The production method is very efficient, so it has almost zero waste. It can have, you don't have to use any water. It's very energy efficient, and the products, the end products, have a very good quality, and they can be mass produced very easily. However, of course, there are two big issues with plastic. The first of them is that it's made out of resource that's not renewable. So one day we will run out of fossil fuel. And the second one is that if you leave it in the nature, it leaves plastic pollution behind. And the problem is not the plastic pollution itself as the plastic bottle, but actually that if it degrades, because most of the people think that plastic don't degrade, but that's not true. It does degrade, and it degrades into microplastics. And it's much harder to get microplastic out of nature than actually the plastic bottle. So what can we do about it? We basically have two main options. One is decrease the consumption, which is great. If we can reuse things, it's wonderful, and we should definitely do it. But we will always need some plastic products. I mean, look around you. I mean, I'm sitting on a chair which has plastic. My laptop has plastic. My phone has plastic. There's a pen with plastic. There's a plastic all around me. The windows behind me has plastic in them. So we also need some materials that will be made out of renewable sources, and that will not leave any toxic things in the environment if they end up in there. And that's bring us to what's the problem today. The problem is that we don't really have that good amount of materials that could help us replace the everyday plastic products that we use. So of course we can make things out of bioplastics, which are usually made out of some renewable materials, but they still cause the same damage mostly as the plastic products. We can use wood, bamboo, or paper, which all comes out of the tree, which is good. But the problem with wood is that it's usually not as good processable as other materials. So you cannot make as good products out of it. And of course, you always have to cut down a tree, which is a problem if you want to make everything out of wood. And then we have some other polymers that we could use on the same processing method as plastic, but we don't really know how to work with them yet, or they are too expensive, or there are other issues with them. And that's where REFR comes in. So what do we do at REFR? Basically, we take sawdust, which is a waste out of wood production. So if you're cutting your furniture down or something, you have these small pieces of wood that are left after, and we take those and we combine them with a natural polymer that's created by microorganisms in nature. So there is no synthetic chemistry in there. And these kind of materials don't leave any microplastic behind. Currently, the polymer is made out of vegetable oils as a feedstock, but actually we are working with a Dutch company that is going to make it in a year or two from a wastewater stream. So the idea is to not just use renewable resources, but make everything out of waste. But that's not really where the magic happens. The magic happens in our patent pending technology, which has to take all these materials and they make these little pellets out of them. And that's essential because we can use those pellets and use them in the injection molding machines that are the same machines that you use for plastic processing. That way we can mass produce almost anything that we want. So what did we decide to do as a first product? We decided to create a fork as our iconic product. And the reason is that the fork really well illustrates the whole problem that we are trying to solve. Because the plastic forks are now banned in the European Union, but the bioplastic forks are also banned, although not that many people know it. And the real alternative on the market that's left and that's widely available is a wood fork. And I don't know about you, but I don't like the wood taste in my food. And that's where REFR comes in, because we make also fork that's sustainable, but it has the same user comfort as the plastic forks. And if it ends up in the nature, it does not leave any microplastic behind. So you may say, well, it's just a fork. How big issue that is? Well, the European market for disposable cutlery is about 1 billion euros. So we are talking about billions of cutleries that are used every year in Europe, and it needs to be replaced. And of course, we can replace them with wood, but that's a lot of trees that we need to cut down. So we are just a startup. So what kind of impact have we created so far? So far we have we have produced in our pilot production around 9 million pieces of cutlery, which help us to replace around 30 tons of plastic that would have to be used for these products. And actually, we just moved to our new factory here in Prague, and we're going to increase next year the capacity by 10 times. And while we are a Czech company, we actually do a lot of business outside of the Czech Republic, and we sell to customers in Germany, France, Austria, Slovakia, and Greece. But for us, the fork really is only a beginning. And everything that you see on the slide are prototypes that we already created. So there are some products in this food portfolio, like small spoon or straws, but we also have a toothbrush that we're going to launch next year. And I find it really funny that both of my co-presenters were talking about hangers, because I just got a prototype of a hanger today. So the opportunity of our materials are very much limitless. And I think this is just show you the future where we can go, where we use materials that are just made out of waste and they don't leave anything toxic behind them after they use, if they cannot be recycled or properly disposed. So thank you for your presentation. And I'm happy to answer any question afterwards if there's any space for it.
Dana, thank you so much. It's truly exciting presentation, exciting product, and I had a opportunity to try myself, and it's really different from wood. It feels much better. It's got no fibers in it. It's very smooth. It's easy to do and biodegradable. So interesting innovation, and I wish you all the best on your journey. And hope with someone in the auditorium you could partner up with will find your ideas inspiring. So thank you again. And we're coming to Q&A session, and I'll start. We've got 2 questions in the pipeline here that I can see. And although they are more sort of finance related, and we want to organize a special green finance session or meeting next year, but I'll still bring them up. And one of them is on taxonomy. So maybe that's for Zuzana and maybe also for Radek. This is endless story. It's my unfavorable topic because I think the taxonomy is always an excuse not to do stuff, and it's going very slow. But any comments on the taxonomy development and how we assess the projects as green or technologies as green? Any comments from, I think, Zuzana or Radek would be the most appropriate.
Yes, maybe I can start if I can. I already answered something there, but anyway, I think the question was to the banks if they have or if they are clear how to assess their asset and loans. And as I already asked also my colleague a few minutes ago, so he told me that the problem is not the criteria; they are quite clear. But what we are struggling now is that to collect the data from the clients and also evaluate them to be or to have them compliance with the taxonomy. So from my experience, I saw the questionnaire that we as a bank send to clients, which in my perspective is quite clear. So what is your CO2 emissions? What is your consumption of water, for example? But if I look at the side of the clients, so very often they don't know how high are their CO2 emissions. So I can see that also for clients is maybe more problematic to count all the things that we want to know. So maybe it will take some time to make clear and how to count all these indicators what we want to know.
Thank you. I think it's a very complex one, and then we'll deal with it on our hopefully special seminar next time around. Zuzana, have you got any observations or comments?
Yeah, I have to admit that taxonomy is not really my specialization, but I just wanted to say that the European Commission is expected, or maybe it was already published, it was supposed to be beginning of December, to publish the new rules on taxonomy, and I hope there would be some clarification also on the process, but that's all I wanted to remark on that one.
Okay, thanks. The next question I have here is for, I think for the retail sector, for Michal, I suppose. And it concerns the way how you can influence your suppliers, because both in your presentation and Marks and Spencer, we could see that you can actually change how you package your own brands, i.e. house brands. Is there a way how you plan to tackle also the external suppliers? So are you working with them to help them to improve their carbon footprint?
Indeed, and it's also part of our thinking. Let's say in the nearest future, we've got established a group with several of our, let's say, major suppliers within Central Europe, It's I think 19 of them were leadership of our and them are meeting on a regular basis, and they are discussing not only business strategy but integral part of the discussion among the leaders of us and our suppliers is also how to in coordinated way and in common, to lower impact of retail and food industry to the environment. So we've already invited our suppliers to measure their food waste, and last year there were first 5 of them who published food waste data based on the same methodology as the Tesco does. This year it was already 9 of them who published such a food waste data, and we are also trying to have a dialogue when it comes to the packaging of our products. And indeed, integral part of future talks will be also the how to cut the emissions within supply chain, because obviously once you set such ambitious target to have a zero target from including supply chain by 2050, you need to address all of your suppliers, starting with the agriculture, the distribution and so on. So this is definitely something that Tesco intends to discuss with them. But based on the food waste example, we know that it's possible. We as a good example, we use the measure, target, act approach, and it works. So I think that it's proper time to motivate also the others, and Tesco has always been explicit to invite all of the parts of the industry to be involved in this regard. So it's not only about us. We know that also inclusion of government, all the stakeholders is just needed to make the change which makes an impact.
Thank you very much. Next question, I think it's again more towards Radek and Zuzana. It regards the coal exit, if you will. I think the Glasgow 26 set out pretty ambitious goals. However, we could see, I think it was yesterday, in Germany again, sort of put forward even more aggressive coal exit goal. And I was wondering whether you think that other countries will follow, whether it's India with 2070 or China 2060 or 50. Do you think that the commercial sphere, and especially being it the banks or investment funds, will actually push this forwards, i.e. we should expect the coal exit slightly earlier? Susanna, maybe if you would start.
Yes, thank you. Well, I definitely think this is going to be the case. It is going to be an economic question, not an ecological one. It will simply not be convenient anymore to produce energy from coal very soon. We see it right now. We see that the renewable energy is right now the cheapest form of energy that is there. It is something that can also be produced locally, so it kind of plays into the whole narrative of security when it comes to energy as well. Coal is going to be a problem also for the finance sector for the reasons that I've mentioned as a follow-up of the COP, because if we will have international agreements of states saying we will no longer support other new power plants, we will not really support coal anymore, well, then this is something that sends a big signal that if you have a part of your money invested in anyhow coal-related businesses, this is something that really has an end date. So the thing is that we might not see the effects in the upcoming year, maybe not even the next one. There will be definitely people who will try to speculate on that one. But in the medium-term perspective, this is definitely going to be the case. And we see, for example, on the principle of well, if I use Czech Republic as an example, we see that we're talking about 2038. That's the Co-Commission suggestion, the original suggestion. But then when we look at private sector, when we look at CES, they have set their own target for 2030, and we already see that the government is reconsidering the decision for 2038. So definitely we expect that the market will be a leader on this one, and that probably we will see that the coal phase out might happen rather earlier than later what we thought. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to happen at the same time in all the countries. There are countries which are more depending on coal. There are countries where the conditions are absolutely easy. So we will see different end dates across the globe, but it's rather going to happen sooner or later. And I believe that businesses will be at the forefront of the transition.
Could you see this trend in your portfolio, and have you also got some tools to actually encourage, not only to say coal is bad and fossil fuels, it's transition, but to encourage the sustainable products, the sustainable procurement, sustainable manufacturing with your clients? I.e., is there a bonus, for example, or do you plan to have some bonus for green technologies or green companies going forward?
Sure. Yes, I agree with Zuzana that it's not only about the targets we will set, but it's also on the market development and the price of emission allowance, which will maybe cause that the coal will be here not so long as we accepted or as we thought. But yes, for sure, I think all the banks will push their clients to be more responsible, to fill some ESG questionnaire, and there will be also the question on the coal, and there will be push not only from the banks but also from the, I would say, investors and also from the public. And what I would maybe add, if we are talking about end of coal, it's very nice, but from my view, we should have also plan B. And what will happen if we want to have any energy in some days in January? So I think mainly in the Czech Republic, we should think also about that we will not have maybe enough energy if we would close all the coal plants. So we should also, from my point of view, think how to solve this problem, that they could be some days with low electricity, low energy. So it is also my point of view.
Great. I can see in the back office that there is someone, Paula, who is trying to ask a question. Anna Maria.
Among us is Anna Maria Dostáková. She wanted to ask a question. She raised her hand. So Anna, are you here? Would you like to ask? No, she doesn't reply.
No. Okay. Now we're coming to an end anyway, so it's 2 minutes to go. So I would like to thank to everyone, all the panelists, for your time and for great presentation. It was I really enjoyed the presentation. I was inspired by some of the ideas. For next time, our group, I hope and I wish will meet in person again after New Year's, and we'll put together a live show, if you will, and that will be either on the green finance, and we're going into more details about green finance and ESG reporting and the questions that were asked concerning the financial markets and taxonomy or what have you, or we'll go into transition from fossil to renewables, and hopefully also trying to address the question how we'll get the energy in cold days of January if the sun is not shining and there is no wind. So some interesting topics that we want to address. And you will hear from us probably after New Year's in January, and we'll try to plan another session sort of beginning of February. And thank Česká spořitelna for supporting this group. And again, thank you everyone. And from the guys from Embassy for helping us with the presentation, putting this together. Thank you all. Great stuff.